What if I told you that the story of Five Nights at Freddy's is all wrong? Yes, everything you know about FNAF is utterly, terribly wrong. The truth is, the real story of the franchise is unknown to most people, and theories of the lore are just straight up incorrect. People like Matthew Pathu? Wrong. Daco? Wrong. All wrong. They're all losers. And this is why today I'm going to tell you the true story of the Five Nights at Freddy's games and explain the story you've never known in great detail. A very common misconception about the FNAF franchise is that the story begins with the original title from 2014, but this is simply not true. To understand the FNAF story in its entirety, we have to go back and visit the older games created by the developer, Scott Cawthon. One of these early games was known as GeForce. This was a ridiculously famous game.
Game of the year?
GeForce!
And was so influential that it resulted in an event we now know as the Anthropomorphic Mandate of Hell, which introduced furries into human society. You can read more about this in my book, Honey, I Farted on the Thanksgiving Turkey. You see, the game introduced the concept of animals that could be anthropomorphic or otherwise bear human resemblances, as these gerbils were equipped with military-grade weapons and sent to murder a capitalist. Not only did these gerbils in part lead to the Anthropomorphic Mandate of Hell, but it also made Cawthon realize that there was a market for these types of characters. And so, he would go on to develop Marble Blast and The Quarry, neither of which were successful as Cawthon completely forgot to implement the anthropomorphic characters due to a bout of memory loss caused by the purchase of dozens of pizzas to celebrate his success of the release of GeForce. So, in a desperate attempt to redeem himself, Cawthon began to develop a new title, trying once again to stimulate the senses of gamers around the world. And so, he created the game Night at Fazbear's. People had often complained that Cawthon's games had uncanny designs for the animals and human beings, almost resembling a horror game of sorts, which is when Cawthon had the idea to take it in stride and create Night at Fazbear's. In Night at Fazbear's, you play as a young Henry Fazbear, who has prophetic visions of anthropomorphic animal characters for a dream pizzeria that he one day wishes to open. The gameplay revolves around you playing hide-and-seek with your lovely siblings in this warm family environment. While the primary gameplay is the late-night hide-and-seek games of your siblings, a portion of the game shows family life in the Fazbear household through the form of mini-games. Henry is shown to be bullied by his siblings often, including being locked in his room after not flushing the toilet. Now, despite his siblings being completely in their rights to abuse him, Henry vows to be the only member of his family to have a legacy like no other. From that moment on, Henry decided that he would become what some have coined as, quote, Sigma. During his college years, he did just that. In his second year of college, Henry would end up meeting William Afton, a student studying asbestos inhalation tactics. They both realized that they had a lot in common very quickly, and tried to create a robot to make creamed corn for them every night. Years later, Henry and William would open a pizzeria called Five Nights at Freddy's, which is the key location of the second game, Five Nights at Freddy's. As Henry spent the better part of his young adult life working at a Chevrolet dealership, he was able to garner enough money to purchase a defunct Dollar General and convert it into his dream pizzeria with William's business prowess. Now, of course, Henry did not have a fortune and frankly had very little money to begin with, so he had to purchase discount furniture and old animatronics from a defunct pizzeria chain called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. A very interesting name given it was the same name that his family had. Unfortunately for Henry, the animatronics he purchased had a flaw designed by the owners of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. When the animatronics smelled pie, they would attempt to escape the pizzeria and return to their former owners. William was unable to modify their programming, and Henry was not having this, so he hired a security guard, which is who you play in the first game. Unfortunately for you, the rivals of the restaurant have tainted you of the smell of pie, making the animatronics attempt to try and get to you as they believe you are their home pizzeria. Luckily, you survive the threat, and Henry commends you with a whopping $120 paycheck at the end of the week. But unfortunately, Henry fires you only 2 days later, after you try and steal the Fazbear family pizza recipe. The third game is called Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which of course takes place canonically after the previous one. This is obvious due to the withered appearance and decrepit nature of the animatronics seen in the first game. Thanks to the success of the original location, Henry and William have created a new establishment with new animatronics, but they also decided to keep the old ones in storage in case they would ever be needed again. Of course, given these new cute animatronics, the establishment is booming and profits are on the rise. Much like the second game, you play as a security guard who has been hired by the now middle-aged Henry Fazbear in order to make sure the animatronics don't activate the nuclear warhead stored at the pizzeria when they are alone at night. In addition to the new animatronics William created, he also stuffed a capuchin monkey into a suit, which is known as the Marinara-ette. This is something William unintentionally released into the pizzeria, which the player must manage by winding up a music box that plays the Valve theme song. Much like the first game, Henry has left voice messages for the player, which detail what the player must do if the animatronics go, quote, beast mode, which involve things like shining lights in their eyes and putting on a mask that resembles Hatsune Miku. Given William Afton and Henry Fazbear's success with his new cutesy animatronics, William decides to break off from the partnership and starts a robotics company to sell his animatronics. This will lead to development and release of the third game, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, where you play as Henry Fazbear once again as he grows the Five Nights at Freddy's pizza chain, but without his partner. This game was huge to the FNAF community given all the new animatronics. It not only included the primary campaign and gameplay of creating restaurants for Henry Fazbear's pizza chain, but it also contained the dreaded Blue Shift campaign, which focused on Springtrap and his friends. The main game ends with Henry Fazbear and his franchise being lit on fire by his former partner, William. As it turns out, his father was the owner of the presumed defunct Freddy Fazbear's pizza chain, and he was trained from birth to take Henry's life for taking his family's business. In the fifth game, FNAF World, the son of Henry, Steven Universe Fazbear, has taken over his father's pizza empire. Much like his father, Steven continued developing even cuter animatronics, as well as developing the Fazbear Entertainment and Dental Repair branch of the company. Surprisingly to Steven Fazbear, this branch would lead to record profits, which would also lead to the construction of the Fazbear International Business Center, a large pizza tower that would be built in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The gameplay of FNAF World revolves around a cutesy persona of Steven Universe Fazbear collecting business executives and investors to help grow his father's empire even further. However, what Steven didn't realize is that these investors and business executives are vicious, and their only desire was to take over the company his father created. In the sixth game of the series, Pizza Tower, Steven has aged significantly and has started to bald, which is unfortunate because it means he has in fact succumbed to bald culture. However, in this game he goes by his nickname, Peppino, as he is going undercover to try and take back his father's company from the evil capitalists who are for some reason embodied by pizza ingredients, likely due to the vast amount of drugs Steven has taken to dull the pain. As Steven Peppino Universe Fazbear attempts to recover the company, he understands that he is unable to succeed and ends up deliberately destroying his father's empire. If he can't have it, nobody will, and the pizza tower crumbles into the ground, leaving little of what once stood. This would then directly go into the seventh game of the series, Five Nights at Freddy's 3. In the game, you play as Steven once again, trapped under the rubble of the pizza tower. Many of the cute animatronics that Steven and his father had created would either be destroyed or heavily damaged. Fortunately for Steven, Springtrap, the lovable servant animatronic created by Henry Fazbear to make creamed corn, has survived the destruction of the pizza tower, but is extremely depressed that all of his friends have been destroyed. Paranoid and afraid, Steven spends his time in a ruined office fending off Springtrap, unaware that he just wants a friend. Eventually, a rescue team manages to find Steven, and Springtrap is left in the rubble of the pizza tower for eternity. The eighth game of the series, The Long Drive, would continue the story of Steven. After the collapse of his empire, he decided to visit his Canadian locations in the far-off land of Quebec. A misconception about his motives is present within the fandom. Evidence as seen in FNAF World point to the fact that he was actually bored of the franchise he inherited. He also needed to escape prosecution in the United States for the death of thousands of people in the pizza tower, and so he consolidated all of his locations in Canada. In The Long Drive, you play as Steven driving up the US Route 7 through the abandoned ruins of Massachusetts and Vermont, eventually arriving at the Quebec locations. After many years of travel getting to Canada, he would eventually arrive and have a son at the ripe age of 72. Knowing his death was near, Steven would die. Fazbear Entertainment and Dental Repair Canada would inherit his estate and build the Mega Pizzaplex, leading into the 9th and final game. In Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, you play as the infant son of Steven Pepino Universe Fazbear, Jeremiah Fazbear. Unlike the previous titles, this establishment has less cutesy animatronics and some that are more glam-rocky. These would be known as the Quebec animatronics, which were highly advanced and personable animatronics that would lead the Fazbear Entertainment and Dental Repair Canada Corporation into vast riches, but also into vast controversy. As the young Jeremiah Fazbear, you break into the facility in order to try and steal the Fazbear family pizza recipe. Of course, you are stopped by the security protocols embedded in Roxy, Monty, and Chica. However, Quebec Freddy decides to help you get the recipe, and this is because he is the reincarnation of Jeremiah's grandfather, Henry Fazbear. Thanks to Henry, Jeremiah would eventually succeed in retrieving the Fazbear family pizza recipe, but only due to Henry's sacrifice. Jeremiah Fazbear would then move on to create a small pizzeria, which would receive insane business, as the Mega Pizzaplex had mysteriously burned down. And now, you know the true story of Five Nights at Freddy's. Many people have often claimed that FNAF 2 takes place before FNAF 1, but this is simply not true, because the animatronics are withered. Now, you see that my logic and theory is completely without flaw, and now all the theories and false ideas of the true story and timeline of FNAF have been squashed. If you like this video, leave a like, and subscribe if you want to hear more about the true stories of video games. I also post near-daily shorts about lost video game content, so feel free to check that out too. Special thanks to Pollyanoid for coming up with the idea for this video. Go check her out at Newgrounds on YouTube, links in the description.
It's time to rest, for you, and for those you have carried in your arms. This ends, for all of us, in communication.